Welcome, everybody, to Jeremy's podcast, Living Free. In these episodes, I will be talking about addiction and mental health. I just feel like that I can relate to a lot of people and I want to give back. And I feel like this way people can connect with somebody and know that there's other people out there going through the same heartaches and life experiences as others. And obviously, everybody's a little different, but I feel like I can give back to others and relate to other people. In this first episode, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to give you my autobiography so everybody can get to know me and my background. But before we start that, I just need to let you know that I'm not a therapist or a doctor, but I feel like I can connect with others, and this is a way of me of giving back by telling my story. And this episode, like I said, will be doing my autobiography, and then we will, in later episodes, jump into what caused me to go to addiction and when I first started noticing my mental health. So with that being said, let's go ahead and start here. My name is Jeremy. I was born in Pocatello, Idaho, but I don't remember much because we moved back to Utah when I was very little. I grew up in American Fork, Utah. I come from a family of 7, including me. I have 2 sisters and 2 brothers. I'm the middle child. Growing up, I remember a loving household. Things were good. My dad worked for Nabisco, yes, the cookie company. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. We were LDS, so we went to church every Sunday and did lots of church activities such as scouting, camping, and so forth. Being raised Mormon was a normal living in Utah in the 80s and 90s. All my friends were LDS and did almost the same activities as I did. I remember my dad going on camping trips with the young men and having so much fun rafting the Green River, cliff jumping, and playing Still the Flag. My dad was my baseball coach in Little League all 4 years. I loved playing baseball. I was very good at this sport. Things were good until I was about 15 years old and started hanging out with different friends. When this started happening, I lost interest in playing baseball and couldn't wait to start driving. When I turned 16, I bought a truck with the help of my dad. It was a 77 Chevy half-ton lifted. We loved our trucks. Me, my older brother, and my dad all had trucks. When I was 16, I was going through addiction and started having depression. I tried killing myself by taking a bottle of aspirin. My older brother and my dad found me and took me to the hospital where they pumped my stomach. Then my parents requested that I go to inpatient treatment for my depression and drug use. I was using pot and drinking. I stayed in treatment for 2 weeks, then went back home. I stayed sober for about a month, then started hanging out with the wrong crowd and started smoking pot and drinking again. It was not long after that meth and crank was becoming around and decided to try it. I used meth for about a year or so and continued smoking pot and drinking as well as doing meth. We dabbled in mushrooms and LSD as well, but this was hard to find, so we used what was the easiest substance to find. I instantly fell in love with getting fucked up. I would go super hard and try to get messed up as fast as I could. I remember waking up on different occasions and not remembering how I got home. I kept using, not following the rules my parents asked of me, so they kicked me out. I can remember always trying to find a place to stay, not knowing where I was going to sleep, or would sleep under cars to try to keep the weather off of me. I was starting to do dumb things like steal from stores to get money for drugs, being arrested, getting put on probation, and not even caring. In and out of jail, not showing up to court dates or probation appointments, having to do 72-hour jail holds, not keeping jobs. I was a total wreck trying to figure out who my real friends were. So finally, after continuing my out-of-control life, I had an opportunity to move to California with a good friend of mine. So with some thinking and planning, I packed up myself and moved. I figured this way I could start my life over and lose the drugs. It started off great. I found a job working in a fabrication shop, making good money, living on my own, paying rent, paying my own way once in my life, and being responsible. At least I thought. After about 3 months, I started looking for something more to occupy my time, looking for people to hang out with, so I started going to a local bar and drinking a lot. I remember telling myself that at least I wasn't doing drugs anymore. I was doing something that was legal, something they sell in stores. No longer could I be arrested for doing illegal drugs unless I was driving under the influence. I ended up meeting a woman that worked at the bar, which ended up becoming my first wife and enabled me to drink even more because I would drink for free, and that led me to drinking every day. She also sold pot, so weed was easy to obtain as well. We stayed married for 7 years. We moved back to Utah in 2007 to help open a restaurant in Oakley, Utah. We lived in Camas. This is when things started to go really bad for me. I was working lots of hours, so I was starting to drink all day long. We worked there for 1 year before opening our own cafe in Camas called the Yolk on Main. My brother and his wife became our business partners, and anybody that knows about business with family knows it never works out well. So after owning the business for about 3 years, me and my first wife divorced. She moved back to California and I stayed out here. I loved the single life. No one to tell me I was drinking too much and complaining about what I was doing, like going to the bar all the time, partying with others, and so on. After about another year or so, I decided I wanted out of the business because my drinking was more important than anything else. I ended up having warrants out for my arrest from a DUI, so I decided to move back to California and try to work things out with my first wife. I stayed out in California for about 6 months, still drinking and drugging. Me and my wife were going nowhere, so I decided to move to Florida where my brother's wife knew people so I could get a job right away. So I got to Florida and started working in a restaurant called AJ's Seafood and Bar and Grill. This was super fun. I was able to drink all day while working and go to the bar at night and party so much. If I didn't have a drink, I would start shaking, so it became even more of an all-day thing. I remember finding a place to stay with this lady that was renting a room. Come to find out, she was addicted to pills and heroin. I didn't know where to find pot, so I started smoking spice a lot as well. We ended up becoming romantically involved, and so I didn't have to pay rent, which enabled me to spend most of my money on alcohol and spice. I would call in sick all the time until I finally quit. Then when I ran out of money, I called my parents, and they bought me a plane ticket back home to Utah to live with them. This was the first time I decided I needed to quit drinking and doing drugs. Going 1 or 2 days with no alcohol, but still going back to it, hiding it all the time and lying about it. This was my day over and over. I remember one day in October of 2012 going to the store in the morning and buying some beers, going back home and drinking them. After they were gone, I wanted more with no money to buy anymore. I started thinking how could I get some money for more alcohol. I don't remember how it came up, but I remember grabbing a black Sharpie and a little piece of paper, writing a note on it for a bank robbery. I remember talking to myself into going to the bank, so I jumped in my car and driving toward the bank and parking in a strip mall parking lot. I got out of the car and went to the rear entrance of the bank. I went up to the teller and slid the note across the counter toward him. I can remember the look on his face. He looked at it and handed me a stack of money, and I went out the front door and went back to my car and then drove off. I remember driving back home and on my way passing lots of cops with their lights on. I knew where they were going. I went home and hid the money under my mattress. 2 hours later, I went out to have a smoke, and the SWAT team was surrounding my house. They told me to get on the ground, then arrested me. I went to the police department, and they questioned me. I ended up being booked into Utah County Jail, where I was looking at a first-degree felony, a 5 to life. I went to court twice, then the feds picked up my case, so the state dropped my case. I was transported to Weber County Jail to await being sentenced. After a year in jail, I was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison. I went to Florence, Colorado to serve my time, and then went back home after prison. I told myself ever since I was arrested that I would never drink or do drugs again. I stayed sober for 9 years. Being sober, I couldn't go to the bars or clubs or anywhere where I used to go to meet women. So I decided to try online dating. I messaged a few women, but there was no connection between us. I went back online, messaged a woman named Rebecca. We messaged back and forth for a while, then met for coffee. Went on further dates from there. After dating for some time, I decided to ask Rebecca to marry me. I still remember that morning when Rebecca told me that she was pregnant and how overjoyed that made me. On April 8th, 2017, we had a beautiful baby girl and named her Kenna. Things were great. I was balling. I had 2 Harley Davidson motorcycles. I was driving a Porsche. Even built my own food truck and owned a window cleaning franchise. In 2020, COVID-19 came and really put a lot of stress on me and my wife and the business. In 2021, I told myself I could smoke pot again. It started off being once in a while, maybe like twice a week, and then went to 4 times a week, then every day, all day. Did this for a while, then one day I decided I could control my drinking, so I had a beer. Pretty soon this became every day as well. It became so bad that I received 4 DUIs in 4 months. After talking to my wife and deciding I needed help, I came to the Phoenix Recovery Center to inpatient and have been sober ever since. After completing residential treatment, I started PHP and was thriving and keeping on the path I wanted to live. I still was facing sentencing for DUI, and the day came when I had court. We thought I would have to do some jail time, but didn't expect what came next. The judge decided to send me to prison instead. That was a real blow to both me and my wife, as well as my daughter. So on that day of court, I had until 5 p.m. to turn myself in. My wife took me to the county jail, and I turned myself in. I went to prison that next Wednesday. I spent 22 months in prison. After my release, I wanted to come back to the Phoenix to finish PHP and IOP. I feel doing these steps will help my long-term sobriety. I have been sober since September 2nd of 2021 and looking forward to continuing my sobriety, even working in this field someday. All right, that's my autobiography, so you guys can know a little bit about my history, and that will wrap this episode up. And I just want to make sure everybody out there knows that there's people out here that love you and can feel your pain, and don't hesitate to reach out to people and talk about your situation, and don't keep it bottled up. That's the worst thing you could probably do. Thank you guys for listening to Jeremy's podcast, Living Free. See you next episode.